The cab let me out at the foot of my own driveway, and the first thing I noticed was that my key wouldn't turn. I'd laid that walkway myself, every fieldstone of it, the summer my son started kindergarten. I knew the weight of that front door, the little catch the deadbolt always had on humid days. So when the brass key slid in and just spun, loose and useless, I told myself my hands were still weak from the hospital. I tried again. Then I saw the lock itself was new, a shiny build-a-grade thing where my old hardware used to be, the kind you buy in a blister pack at the home center for $19. Somebody had taken my lock out and thrown it in the trash. 6 weeks after that afternoon, the people standing inside my house would be on their knees on my own living room floor, hands shaking, begging me to stop. I'll get to that, but before I do, if a story about an old man clawing his life back is the kind of thing you came here for, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what town you're listening from. I'm 71 years old and I lay bricks for a living for half a century. And it means more than you know that anybody's listening at all. Let me back up. In September, I had a stroke. Right side, bad one. I was up on a scaffold, repointing the chimney on the old Methodist church downtown, 68 feet up, doing the kind of work my doctor had already told me to quit. And the next thing I remember clearly is a fluorescent ceiling and a tube down my throat. They told me later I'd been on that scaffold a long time before the foreman found me, slumped against the parapet. 11 days I don't remember at all. Then 3 weeks of learning to make my right hand close around a fork, learning to say my own name without it coming out like mush. The speech therapist, a patient young woman who smelled like green apple gum, would hold up a flashcard with a picture of a key on it, and I'd sit there for 30 seconds trying to make the word come, sweat standing out on my forehead like I was lifting a wheelbarrow of mortar. That detail matters, so hold on to it. Because the whole thing they did to me hung on one lie, that the stroke had scrambled my brains, that I couldn't be trusted to know what was mine. My wife passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, fast and merciless. Her name was Margaret, and everybody who loved her called her Maggie, and she was the only person on this earth I ever fully trusted. We raised one boy in that house. I built it with my own 2 hands in 1979. Poured the footings, framed it, did the masonry, the whole thing. On a hill above a little lake up in the Finger Lakes country of New York, on a road called Quarry Hill, because that's where my granddad cut stone. Maggie planted lilacs along the south wall. I notched our son's height into the cellar door frame every birthday with my pocket knife until he was 16 and told me it was childish. So I came home from the rehab place on a cold blue Tuesday in late October, expecting my son to pick me up. He didn't. He sent a cab voucher and a text that said he was swamped with the baby coming. His wife was 7 months along and that he'd see me settled in. I figured that meant he'd be at the house. I figured a lot of things that day that turned out to be wrong. I knocked on my own door. Footsteps came. And the door opened, and standing there in my front hall was a man I'd met exactly twice in my life, my daughter-in-law's father. Big fella, grey crew cut, golf shirt stretched over a gut, a can of beer in his hand at 2 in the afternoon. Behind him, I could see clear into my living room, and my recliner was gone, and Maggie's lace curtains were gone. And there was the enormous grey sectional sofa where my reading chair used to sit, the kind of furniture that looks like it was delivered by forklift. "Help you," he said, looked me up and down like I was selling magazine subscriptions. "I live here," I said. My voice still came out slow and thick on the left side. "Who are you to be in my house?" His eyebrows went up, and something almost like a smile crossed his face. "Oh," he said, "you're the dad. Not you're his father. The dad, like a piece of furniture they'd been warned might still be in the building. They said you'd be in that place another month at least." "What place? Where's my son?" "Out picking up the crib with his wife." Big day. He took a slow pull on the beer, and didn't move out of the doorway. My leg was shaking under me. I'd walked from the cab and my hip was screaming, and all I wanted on God's earth was to sit down in my own kitchen. "Listen," he said, "this is going to be awkward, so I'll just say it plain. There's been some changes while you were laid up. We moved in, me and the wife, to help the kids out with the little one. And, well, there's just no room for you here anymore." I heard the words and they didn't make sense, the way a foreign language doesn't make sense. "This is my house," I said. "I built this house." "Not anymore, it isn't." He said it kindly almost, which made it worse. "Your boy's got it now. Power of attorney, while you were under. He's the legal guardian. Deed's been in his name going on 2-3 weeks. He shrugged, like he was telling me it might rain. "Your stuff's all boxed up in the garage. Take whatever fits in the cab. The rest we'll send on. I want you to understand something. I'm not a man who falls apart. I've buried my wife and both my parents and a brother. But standing on that porch, I had to grab the door frame to keep the world from sliding sideways. And I think for about 10 seconds my mouth just opened and closed and nothing came out, and I saw him watching me do it. And I saw him decide that the doctors had been right about my brain. Then I heard a bark, and around the corner of the house came Banjo. Banjo was my dog. 13 years old, a big yellow mutt with a grey muzzle and hips as bad as mine. And he'd slept at the foot of my bed every single night since Maggie got sick. He'd been staying with my son while I was in the hospital. When he saw me, he came at a dead run, or as much of a run as his old legs could manage, and he hit my knees and damn near knocked me down, crying the way dogs cry, that high whine, his whole back half wagging. I went down on my good knee in the cold and put my face in his fur, and for 1 second I thought, all right, this is bad, but it's a misunderstanding. I'll sort it out. At least I've got my dog. "Banjo, come," the man said, sharp, and snapped his fingers. Banjo froze, looked at me, looked at him, ears flat, confused, and that confused look on my dog's face did something to me that the lock and the sofa hadn't. "That's my dog," I said, getting back to my feet, my knees shrieking. "He comes with me. Dog stays. Your daughter-in-law's gotten attached, and wherever you're headed, they don't allow animals. Wherever I'm headed." My voice came back to me then, the slowness burning off it. "And where exactly do you figure I'm headed?" he told me. "There was a real nice care community 20 minutes up the highway," he said. "Place called Bellhaven. They specialized in folks with cognitive issues after a medical event. My son had already done the paperwork, signed me in, and a transport van was on its way to pick me up within the hour. Affordable, he said, especially since I didn't have assets anymore." He patted my shoulder when he said it. 2 soft pats, the way you'd settle a spooked horse, and he told me not to fight it, that I'd get used to it, that they all got used to it eventually. I knocked his hand off me. "I want to talk to my son. Right now." "He doesn't want to talk to you, friend. He's been through enough. The accident, the worry, the new baby. The doctor told them you might get like this. Agitated, paranoid, aggressive." He looked at where I'd shoved his hand off my shoulder, made a little show of it, and that right there is exactly what they warned us about. The door shut in my face. Through the side window, I watched him pick up his phone and laugh at something. I heard Banjo barking and scratching from inside. People ask me, when I tell this, why I didn't just call the police right then, standing on the porch. Call 911, report a break-in, report a theft. Here's the truth of it. I didn't have a phone, mine was somewhere in a bag at the rehab facility, or so they said, and it never turned up. I didn't have my wallet. I had $11 in my coat, and a body that couldn't run, and a voice that still slurred when I got upset, and I had just been told by a man twice my size that I was paranoid and aggressive and that there was paperwork signed by my own son declaring me incompetent. You learn fast. that a confused-looking old man with no ID shouting on a porch about how everything's been stolen is the easiest person in America for everybody to ignore. They'd built the trap before I ever woke up. The walls of it were made of my own diagnosis. I went around to the garage. The side door was unlocked. Inside, against the wall where I used to keep my mortar mixer, were maybe 15 cardboard boxes, my whole life, sorted by strangers. I opened one. Clothes, balled up, wrinkled. Another had my books with the spines bent. The third one I opened was Maggie's jewelry chest, the little oak box I'd built her for our anniversary, and I opened the lid with my hands already shaking, and it was empty. All of it gone. Her mother's brooch, the garnet earrings, the strand of pearls she wore at our wedding, empty velvet. I sat down on the cold cement floor among the boxes of my own life, and I heard a vehicle in the drive, and through the open garage door I watched a white van pull in. Bellhaven Transport stenciled on the side in peeling blue letters, and two big men in scrubs got out, and one of them looked at a clipboard and called my name like he was calling a number at the deli counter. I'm going to be honest about what came next, because I don't think these things should be made pretty. I told them I wasn't going. The younger one, shaved head, neck like a fire plug, told me it could be the easy way or the hard way. I tried to stand, and my bad leg buckled, and he caught me. But it wasn't a kindness, it was a hold. My arm twisted up behind my back in one smooth motion, like he'd done it 1,000 times. And he leaned down by my ear and said, "Easy, Pops. Don't go hurting yourself," in a voice that had no person in it at all. They walked me to the van. I yelled, but my nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile off through the trees Maggie and I had planted for privacy 40 years ago, and the privacy I'd wanted so badly was the thing that swallowed my voice. They put me in the back of the van, and it smelled like pine cleaner over something worse underneath, and the doors slammed, and I sat in the dark on a metal bench, every pothole sending a spike up through my hip, for 40 minutes. Until the doors opened on a squat cinder-block building set back behind a strip mall, with a sign out front missing half its letters. I won't spend too long inside Bellhaven, because honestly, I've tried for 2 years not to, but you should know what it was, because it matters to how this ends. It was a warehouse for people families wanted to forget. The lobby smelled like overcooked cabbage and ammonia and something sweet and rotten beneath. There were folks in wheelchairs lined up facing a TV bolted to the wall, and not one of them looked up when I came in. Not one. And that was the thing that frightened me most. Not the smell, not the rough hands, but a room full of human beings who'd stopped looking up. A heavy-set woman at the desk with a name tag that said, "Gaddis took the clipboard without looking at me. Family signed him in," she said. "Son did," the orderly said. "Flight risk, post-stroke, possible dementia. Watch him, please," I said. My voice came out slow again. The worst possible time for it. "My son stole my house. I need to call a lawyer. I need to call." Gaddis said, not unkindly, writing on her chart. "They all need to call a lawyer." Room 4. And that was that. They put me in a room with 3 beds for 2 beds worth of space. The window painted shut. 2 roommates who'd gone somewhere inside themselves and weren't coming back. They took my coat, my $11, my belt, and my shoelaces. They gave me a thin gown. Dinner was at 5, and it was a scoop of something grey and a roll. Lights out at 8, and the man with the shaved head leaned in the doorway before he left and said, "Welcome home," and grinned. I lay on that mattress in the dark, springs digging into my back, listening to one of my roommates moan softly and rhythmically, the way you'd rock a baby. And I'll tell you the truth, I thought about giving up. I'm not too proud to say it. I was 71. I'd had a stroke. I'd lost my wife, and now my house and my dog and Maggie's pearls. And the easiest thing in the whole world would have been to close my eyes and become one of those people in the lobby who'd stopped looking up. But somewhere under all that, around 2 in the morning, something hard and old woke up in me, and it had Maggie's voice. And what it said was, they forgot something, because here is the one card they didn't know I held. When Maggie got sick, we sat down with an old friend of mine, a lawyer named Saul Brenner, who'd done my contracts for 30 years and was the sharpest mind I ever met, and we put everything in order. Saul set up an irrevocable trust, not a will, not a power of attorney, a trust. We moved the house into it, the land, the savings, the truck, my granddad's masonry tools, all of it. And the trustee, the only person on earth with the legal power to sell or give away 1 square foot of that property, wasn't me as a man. It was me as trustee, a separate legal thing. A power of attorney lets somebody act for you, the person. My son's POA let him sign my name on a hospital form, maybe move money in my checking account. But the house didn't belong to me, the person. It belonged to the trust. And a power of attorney can't reach into a trust and pull the house out. Whatever deed my son had filed at the county, using a power of attorney to sell a house he didn't own and couldn't transfer, was worthless, void from the start. He'd robbed me of something he never actually had the keys to. The only problem was that I was locked in a cinder block box with no phone, no money, and no shoelaces, and the man who could prove it was 40 miles away and didn't even know I'd woken up. It took me 4 nights to find my way out, and I owe that to a young man named Matteo. Matteo worked the overnight as a cleaner, mopping the halls from 11 to 7, and around 2 every morning he'd slip into the linen closet near my room to check his phone, which wasn't allowed. I'd hear the door click and see the glow under it. On the 4th night, I waited until I heard him pass, and I followed him, shuffling barefoot and silent in the dark, and I stood in the closet doorway, and when he looked up and saw me, he nearly came out of his skin. "I'm not gonna tell anybody," I whispered, fast, before he could bolt. "I just need help. 5 minutes." He was maybe 23. Tired eyes, a little gold cross at his throat. "Man, I can't," he whispered back. "I need this job. They catch me. My son stole my house. He had me kidnapped and dumped here and told everybody my brain's gone, so nobody'd believe me. I need to make 1 phone call. 1 to a lawyer. Then I'll never bother you again." He looked at me a long time, the way you look at somebody trying to figure out if they're crazy. And I understood. Everybody here said something like this. So I did the only thing I had left. I reached under the collar of that thin gown and pulled out the chain I'd worn for 4 years, the one they hadn't bothered to take because it was hidden under the gown, and on it was Maggie's wedding band, which I'd put on that chain the day she died and never taken off. "This was my wife's," I said. "It's real gold. There's a 1/4 carat in it. It's worth 1,000, maybe more. It's the last thing of hers I've got in the world." I unclasped it with hands that wouldn't hold still. "Take it. Just let me use the phone." Matteo looked at the ring in my palm in the glow of his phone screen. And then he did something I will remember on the day I die. He folded my fingers back over it, gently, and pushed my hand toward my chest. "Keep it," he said. "Madre de Dios, keep your wife's ring." He pressed his phone into my other hand. 5 minutes, I'll watch the hall. I dialed Saul's home number from memory. 40 years of friendship, I knew it like my own. It was 2:15 in the morning. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep, and I said, "Saul, it's me. I'm alive and I'm not in a coma and I'm not demented and my son has stolen everything and I'm locked in a place called Bellhaven and I need you to get me out." There was a silence. Then Saul said, very quietly, "Your boy called my office 2 weeks ago, told me you'd had catastrophic brain damage, told me you were non-responsive." Another silence. "I'm so sorry. I should have come to see for myself. Does this sound non-responsive to you?" And then his voice changed completely, went flat and cold and professional, the voice I'd heard him use to take grown men apart in conference rooms. Listen to me carefully. The trust is intact. He cannot have transferred that house. A durable power of attorney has no authority over trust assets. None. I drafted it that way for exactly this reason. Whatever he filed is a fraudulent instrument, and it is void. He doesn't own your house. He never did. Tell me every detail of where you are. I told him fast. The forged deed, the POA, the van, the diagnosis they'd weaponized. He listened, and when I finished, he said, "I'll have an emergency order in front of a judge by 9 a.m., and I'm calling the state's elder abuse unit tonight." Hang on, I'm coming for you. I handed Mateo back his phone. He was looking at me different now. You weren't lying, he said. No, son, I wasn't. I held up the ring on its chain. 41 years, this woman and me. He hesitated, then said, "My abuela's in a place like this, across the county. We can't get her out, the paperwork, the money." He looked away. "Give 'em hell, viejo." I wrote her name on my palm with a pen he lent me, Imelda. I want you to remember that too. Saul moved like a freight train. By noon the next day, a sheriff's deputy walked into Bellhaven with a court order, and Gaddis tried to tell him I was a danger to myself, and the deputy looked at her and said, "Mom, this man's being released to his attorney, and the state's going to be asking your facility some questions." I walked out into the cold sunshine in a paper-thin gown with no shoelaces, unshaven, hollow-eyed, and Saul was standing by his car in the parking lot, and he took one look at me and his jaw went tight, and he didn't say anything for a second because he couldn't. "Get in," he finally said. "We've got work to do." I lived in Saul's guest room for the next 2.5 weeks while we built it, and the more we turned over, the worse and the better it got. The deed my son filed was exactly the garbage Saul said it'd be. The county recorder had stamped it without a second look, because county recorders stamp 1,000 deeds a week and don't check whether a power of attorney covers trust property. Legally, it was nothing, but the money was where the real story was. While I was unconscious, my son and his wife had drained my checking and savings, cashed out the part of my retirement that wasn't trust protected, and run up $60,000 on credit cards opened in my name, and most of that cash hadn't even stayed with them. It had flowed straight to her parents, the man in the golf shirt and his wife, under the heading of caregiving expenses and home improvements. All told, they'd stolen north of $300,000 from a man they'd told the world was a vegetable. And here was the part that made Saul smile like a man who'd just been dealt a royal flush. They weren't done. Saul's investigator found that my son had an appointment lined up with a mortgage broker. They were going to take a home equity loan against the house, my house, and pull out another 200 grand before they ever put it on the market. They thought they owned it free and clear. They had no idea the title was poison. Any honest lender would run the second somebody actually looked. "We can shut it down today," Saul said one night. Papers spread across his dining table. Injunction. Freeze the accounts. Have all 4 of them arrested for fraud and elder abuse by the weekend. "How much do we get back?" he grimaced. "If we move now, maybe half. The rest's gone." The father-in-law bought a bass boat. The mother-in-law bought a bass boat. The mother-in-law's been on a spree. Your son and his wife have been eating out every night and just booked a trip to Cabo. I sat there a long time. I thought about my boy. The kid who used to ride in the truck bed with the dog and the trowels, who'd hand me bricks when he was 7, who'd cried on my chest at his mother's funeral. I tried to find him in the man who'd had me thrown in a van. I couldn't. Somewhere along the way, that boy had decided a man who could no longer be useful to him was just an obstacle to be removed, and the people he'd married into had handed him the shovel. "What if we don't move now?" I said slowly. "What if we let them keep digging?" So set down his pen. "They left me to rot in a room with the windows painted shut," I said. "They told everyone I'd lost my mind so nobody would listen to me. They took my wife's pearls off her own jewelry box. I don't want half. I want them to feel exactly what I felt. I want them on their knees." Saul studied me for a long moment, and then he nodded slow, and he said, "I know a way, but you have to do everything I tell you exactly, or it falls apart. Here's what we did, and I'll tell it straight, because the people who pulled it off were lawyers, and it was every bit legal." Saul stood up a holding company, a shell on paper, and through it filed a lien against my own house, a claim for an old unpaid construction loan. The kind of thing that goes on a property and clouds the title, so no bank will touch it. It was a fiction, and it was filed in a way that hurt nobody but couldn't be wired around. The total, with the interest we tacked on, came to $240,000. Then we sent a letter on the shell company's stationery to my son. It said the lien holder was preparing to foreclose unless the debt was cleared within 30 days, but, as a courtesy, would accept a payoff of $180,000 to clear the title and walk away. I knew exactly what they do because I knew what they were now. They had a mortgage broker waiting to hand them $200,000 the second the title came clean. They were greedy, and they were in a hurry, and a problem that could be made to vanish for $180,000 was, to people like that, no problem at all. 9 days later, the shell company received a wire. $180,000 scraped together from the money they'd stolen from me, plus a hard money loan, plus, I found out later, the sale of the base boat. They paid me back with my own money, and they thanked the shell company for its courtesy, and they signed the papers, and they had no idea they just funded the rope. The trap was set. All we needed was the right night to spring it. My daughter-in-law had planned a housewarming. I found the invitation online because she'd made it public, proud as anything. "Come celebrate our beautiful new home. First Saturday in December. Cocktail attire, a caterer, a bartender, the works." I spent that week getting ready in a way that had nothing to do with the party. I got a haircut. I bought a charcoal suit off the rack and had it taken in, because the stroke and the stress had melted 20 pounds off me. I had my old wingtips shined until you could read a newspaper in them. And the morning of, I stood in front of Saul's guest room mirror, and for the first time since that cab ride, the man looking back at me wasn't somebody things were done to. He was a man who built things, who'd built 100 houses and a family and a life, and who was about to take back every stone of what was his. It had snowed the night before. The whole hill was white and clean when Saul's car came up, Quarry Hill Road, and behind us, in a second car with its lights off, were a sheriff's deputy and an investigator from the district attorney's elder abuse unit, with warrants in a folder on the seat. Every window of my house was lit gold. There were luxury cars all up the drive and a jazz trio I could hear through the walls and people in good clothes laughing, holding wine, in the rooms I'd framed with my own hands. It looked beautiful. It looked like a thief's ball. I rang my own doorbell. My son opened the door. He had a drink in his hand and a grin on his face that died the second he saw mine. The color went out of him like somebody'd pulled a plug. "Dad," he said, "just that. Dad, they said I was a vegetable." I finished for him. Sorry to spoil the party. I stepped past him into my own front room, and the laughter died in waves as people turned to look. I saw the father-in-law by the fireplace choke on his drink. I saw the mother-in-law clutch her purse, and I saw, around my daughter-in-law's neck, a strand of pearls I would have known in the dark with my eyes shut. Maggie's pearls, the one she wore the day I married her. "Folks," I said, and my voice carried clean across that silent room with not one slur in it, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a misunderstanding about whose house this is." My son stepped toward me, face going red. "You can't just, somebody call the police. He's trespassing." "Already done," Saul said, stepping in behind me. "The police are here, and Mr. Pardon, the homeowner, is the lawful owner of this property and this trust. The deed your family filed is void. It was filed without authority. It is, in the eyes of the law, a forgery. The deputy and the investigator came through the door behind him, and the deputy had handcuffs in his hand. Furthermore, Saul went on, and he read it out loud so the whole room could hear. The warrants for 4 people: my son, his wife, her father, her mother, for conspiracy, grand larceny, forgery, elder abuse, and filing fraudulent documents. The jazz trio had stopped. You could hear the ice settling in somebody's glass. The father-in-law started yelling about entrapment, about lawyers, and the investigator looked at him and said the only crime committed in that house was the one done to me, and told the guests they'd need to leave, that this was now a crime scene. They fled, those well-dressed people, grabbing coats, not meeting my eyes. They cuffed the father-in-law first, still red and roaring. The mother-in-law, makeup running. My son, saying over and over that there'd been a mistake, that his attorney would fix it. My daughter-in-law was last, and she stood in front of me, Maggie's pearls catching the light, her hands on her pregnant belly, and she said, "Please, I'm having a baby. Please don't let them take me. Think about your grandchild." I looked at her a long time, and then I reached out and unclasped the pearls from around her neck, slow, and she flinched, like I'd raised a hand to her, though I never would. "These were my wife's," I said. "She wanted a granddaughter to have them one day, but you have to be the kind of person who's earned them." I put the pearls in my pocket. "Take her," I said to the deputy, and they did. Now, the people who watch these stories always want to know what happened after. And the last time I told one of these, I left a few threads loose, and I heard about it. So this time, I'm tying them all off. The law. My son and his wife didn't get a slap on the wrist. Sol made sure of that. Made sure the DA understood the kidnapping for what it was. They each did real time, 18 months, plus 3 years supervision after, plus full restitution that wiped them out to the studs. Her parents, who'd cooked the whole thing up, got 3 years apiece. Every dollar came back. The bass boat got sold to pay me. There was no probation and a shrug. There was a price, and they paid all of it. Bellhaven. I didn't let that go either. Bellhaven. I didn't let that go either. The state's investigation I kicked off didn't stop with me. They found a dozen folks signed in on shaky paperwork, found the rough hands, found the painted soot windows and the grey food. The place was shut down inside 4 months, the owner charged. The residents moved to real care. The man with the shaved head doesn't work with old people anymore. I made sure of that part personally. Mateo. I found him. I bought my house back free and clear from the trust, but I couldn't live in it. Too many ghosts now, good and bad. So I sold it to a young couple expecting their first, for more than I ever dreamed. And I took some of that money and I did 3 things with it. I set Mateo up with the money to finish the nursing degree he'd been picking at 1 class a year, and the day he graduated I was in the 3rd row. And his grandmother, Imelda, the name I wrote on my palm in the dark, I got her out of the place she was in and into a good one, the kind with a garden and people who look up when you walk in, and I paid for it as long as she lived, which turned out to be 2 more good years. The 3rd thing was a fund in Maggie's name, at the community college, for kids who want to learn a trade, masonry, carpentry, the work that built this country and is dying for lack of hands. They put her name on a little brass plaque. She'd have hated the fuss and loved it anyway. And the rest, I'll be honest with you, I put in a new trust, locked down so tight that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, there isn't a soul alive who can pry it open. Once burned, you change the locks. All of them. I bought a 30-foot camper with the change. Banjos in the passenger seat. I got him back the morning after the arrests, and he hasn't been more than 10 feet from me since. Grey in the muzzle, snoring as I drive. I'd always meant to see the Pacific with Maggie, and we always let life get in the way, and life isn't in the way anymore. We're somewhere in New Mexico as I tell you this. The desert gone pink at the edges, the dog dreaming, the road wide open. My son wrote me a letter a few months back from inside, full of sorry, full of blame for her parents, full of asking. I haven't answered it. Maybe one day I will, if he ever shows me he's somebody worth answering. But trust is like a load-bearing wall. You can patch a crack in it, but you and I both know it's never quite the same wall again, and you'd be a fool to stand under it like nothing happened. Here's what I learned, for whatever it's worth, from an old bricklayer, talking to you from a parking lot in the desert. Loving somebody doesn't mean letting them stand on your neck. Forgiveness is a fine thing, but it was never meant to make you stupid. And family isn't something a person is owed just because they share your blood. It's something earned, brick, by how they treat you when you can't do a single thing for them. I built houses my whole life, mansions and shacks and everything between. But the most important thing I ever built turned out to be the one thing my own son couldn't take, no matter how many locks he changed or vans he sent. My own self-respect. And I am never, as long as I live, handing the keys to that one over to anybody again. If any of this hit home, do me that favor. Hit like, hit subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, in my shoes, would you have forgiven him, or would you have driven off into the desert like I did? I read everyone. Banjo and I will see you down the road.